Welcome to Westbury Analytics Radio, where ServiceNow performance analytics for senior executives comes alive. Experienced ServiceNow architects, performance management experts, and other executives in your field share insights for how to drive performance management using the power of ServiceNow performance analytics. Performance analytics is a game changer, but it requires a different way of thinking than how most people think about reporting and performance measurement. Our goal here is to help you develop that new way of thinking. I am your host, Pedro Soto. Ryan Ogilvie joins us today. Ryan is a service management professional who leverages practical expertise to produce results with a focus on helping service delivery groups align with the business goals of the stakeholders that they serve. Let's go to Ryan.
Hello, everybody. This is Pedro Soto, once again welcoming our listeners to another episode of Westbury Analytics Talk Radio. Now, today's special guest is Ryan Ogilvie. Now, Ryan heads up Blackfriar Consulting, where he helps organizations to focus on process, people, and technology, along with performance measurement, so they increase service delivery rates, decrease incident downtime, and improve customer satisfaction. Now, there's a lot more to the story, and I'm going to let Ryan tell us a little bit about himself, how he got started with Blackfriar Consulting before we dive into our conversation. Ryan, thanks for taking time from your busy schedule to join us. Tell us more about you and Blackfriar.
First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a lovely sunny afternoon in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So thank you for that. Again, so my name is Ryan Ogilvie, and I'm an ITSM consultant here with Blackfriar. And basically how it happened was I got my start in IT, even though it really wasn't the profession I trained for. So interestingly, I'd gone to college and studied civil engineering. When I finished college, there was an economic downturn, and I found myself looking for work and competing with those that had many years of experience, not only professional experience, but like life experience as well. And I was just fresh out of school. Yeah. So I took jobs where I could. I learned a lot of different trades. I drove trucks and worked in warehouses and all those kinds of things. But what I found that was similar in all those roles was that I always sought out new ways to figure out how I could do things more effectively. So when I was driving trucks, I would use kind of the information I had to kind of figure out which would be the best route to take. Or when I was working in warehouses, how to organize people and their staffing and those kinds of things. So I found very early on that these analytics kind of were helping me do the things I needed to do. And as things happen, the economy picks up, and in around 2006, there was such a surge in job vacancies in the Calgary market that you could, if you had kind of the right skill set and background and you could talk your way through an interview, you could pretty much talk yourself into any job, which was really nice. And it just so worked out that in our local market, the IT space was looking for people to help them with service desks and incident management and things like that. So I kind of started out working there. And I've kind of been in that space ever since, kind of working with those things, looking to drive value and using analytics to do that.
Excellent. And that is one of your areas of focus, how to help companies launch effective analytics programs, right?
Correct. So in many cases, you'll find that people it's kind of like when you buy a Fitbit, right? Like, how much steps did I take? How much water do I drink? When you start seeing what you actually do, you actually just naturally want to do more of it. And what I found, really early on is a lot of the organizations I was working with was that that metrics seemed to be a side effect of a tool set that they had bought. That it did some things. We could see like that there's some work happening, but they weren't really leveraging it to do the heavy lifting on their behalf to make those improvements for them. So
that's a fairly common phenomenon. Now, you've had a fair amount of experience. What have you learned? What have you noticed are some of the most common mistakes that are being made by organizations, that should be or that want to launch an analytics program?
So there's a couple, I guess, and I'll kind of break them down with a little context. So the first thing I noticed is that a lot of organizations had no metrics at all. So no metrics is a common mistake. And it's not that they don't have them available. It's just they don't have any kind of way of using them or extracting them in the way that they wanted. So one organization I was with, they said, we recognize the fact that we need to do something to help improve our service delivery. We know that it's slow. We know that we have constraints. We just don't know where they exist, and we'd like to use metrics to do that. We just really don't know how to get started. So when I asked them, I said, okay, well, let's start where we're at and find out, what are you doing now? And they showed me they had one graphic. It was only one. And it looked like a giant blue circle, and next to it was like a really, really tiny circle. So it looked, if you can imagine, it looked like Jupiter and one of its moons. That's exactly what the picture looked like. And I was like, what is this? And they're like, this is our service delivery. This is it. This is what we've got. We've got the big blue circle, and we've got the little circle. That's service delivery in our dashboard. Wow. Right? So it's like we had nowhere to go but up from here. So we put together a couple of simple KPIs and started from there. And that's kind of their mistake was that they didn't have any.
Okay.
Another common mistake is people that have far too many metrics. They get the analysis paralysis sort of thing. And so I went to another organization that said, we've heard you did some good work with these companies. Can you come and help us as well? It's fantastic. Sure. We sat down and said, show me what kind of metrics you are doing. And they said, this is our metrics operational report. And it was like this stack of paper. And I was like, looks like a lot. And so it was 46 pages of metrics that they had cut and pasted and cut and pasted. And I was like, oh, this is a lot of information here. And so I said, look, let me reproduce this same report. And as I'm reproducing it, I will see and share it with the same audience, and we'll see where we go. So in doing this, in the middle of the report, I put a note that said, if you are reading this, I will give you $20 if you drop by my desk. And I had it in red text. And I submitted the report, and there was, I think, 70 or 80 people that were meant to read this thing. And not one person.
Not 120 left your pocket.
That's right. I was still rich as I was when I got in the morning. And so when I shared that with the operational manager, I said, we're really missing the mark here. There's a lot of metrics. There's a lot of great information probably, but we're not doing the right amount of metrics. And so I showed him the note, and I said, obviously no one's really reading it, and why would they? This thing is so difficult to consume. Who has the time? We're very busy. And so it gets to be kind of that Goldilocks effect where if you have too few, not so great. If you have too many, not so good. You need to find the kind of that right balance. And I think, which leads me kind of like to the third mistake that people kind of see quite a fair bit, is that there need to be perfect. And so people, they want to do everything right off the bat. And the trick is you need to just start. Don't wait, just start now. You're going to make some corrections and understand that you're going to learn as you go around. You're going to have metrics upon your metrics to say that, we're pulling too many metrics. That's our metric. We're pulling too few metrics or the wrong metrics. That's our metric. So let's take a closer look at that. So that there's no necessarily a need to be perfect right off the bat. And I think as long as everyone kind of aligns to that at the beginning, that we're trying to move the needle in the right direction, we're going to make some, not necessarily the word mistakes, but we're going to find some things out. We're going to get some opportunities and kind of progress from there.
Yeah, that's excellent. I know your second point of having too many metrics. So we specialize in helping clients who use the ServiceNow platform leverage a very powerful module, which is an in-platform analytics called Performance Analytics. Right. And out of the box, literally, when they buy the module as an add-on to the platform, out of the box, there are about 470 KPIs just for ITSM. I'm not talking about the other domains like ITOM, ITBM, HR. And that can be overwhelming. And so one of the things we do is really help people figure out the key, literally key, in other words, the performance indicators that are driving their results in connection to business goals. And really, really helpful for folks to get focused. So yeah, can definitely appreciate what you mean. So when you've worked with folks, what would be some key questions that you would recommend that they ask themselves as they're thinking about implementing an effective analytics program?
The key question, and it really goes to, I guess, anything we're talking about, and if you've heard it once, you've probably heard it a gazillion times, is it's always about the why. And now that's not the only key question, but it's a very important question, because if you've ever had like a 5-year-old or something like that in your car for a long road trip, they ask why, you're going to learn very quickly that you need to understand what that why is if you're going to start a conversation, because if you don't, it's going to be a long road trip. And so it's super important to make sure that you understand what that looks like, and to fully appreciate who the why is for, right? So when we're talking about the why, it should be contributing to the business objectives, right? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
So when we looked at that, so if we took that example with a 46-page report, they said, well, why are we doing this? And I got a lot of people that looked around the room that they're kind of, you could tell who the leaders were in the group, because they were looking to their leader, like, because they didn't know. They're like, this is something we've just always done. And said, okay, that's fine. Like, that we understand that's why we're doing it now, but why do we need to continue to do this? What value are we going to get out of this? And if we're not using this for anything valuable, the effort that we're putting into it is really it just isn't there. And so, like, to reproduce their report, like I executed like a monthly reporting engine in their system.
Yep.
And then basically copied and pasted things into a Word document. Like, it was the strangest thing ever. There was no dashboarding or none of that. And so that it took hours. And like, what did I get out of that time spent to do that for hours?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we don't know. And so really starting with that why question is super important. Like, what is the one thing or two things that we're looking for that are that why? What gets us out of bed here?
Yep.
Another question that kind of comes up with that, and I get this one a bit much, is, okay, you tell us why, but it's a bit daunting when you haven't sorted out the why, right? So, well, where do we start then? How do I even begin? Like, you say I should know, but like, if we don't, like, where do we begin? Right? And so when we talk about where we start, and people think of this as almost like a place. Like, where do we begin? And really, it's more of a mindset is where we start. And overall, we just need to start simple, right? If you can think about starting something in this, it boiled down to the simplest terms, with the end in mind, everything else going backwards just becomes that much easier to figure out, right? So in many cases, what will end up happening is they'll say, well, this is a technology problem, or we'll blame it on that. We talk in terms of being IT a lot. IT people are probably some of the worst. We cause the problem ourselves because what we think of in IT terms. So we'll say, well, something has a memory leak and we need to perform resets to resolve it. And that's why we're doing this in the first place. That's our why. But when we think of it in those terms, we're really never going to get out of resolving things on that kind of granular level. And so, because we are providing a service to a business, we need to make sure that we are, working with the business as a partner, as a provider.
Yep.
And so, when we begin where we start, we want to start with focusing on how this improves business. And ultimately, in the case, exists, how our business supports their customers. So if we're looking at that kind of value chain from end to end, how does that work? We need to take a look at, what makes the company successful. And in some cases, that's money. In some cases, if it's a nonprofit, it's something else. But what makes them successful? And we just need to understand that value chain.
Yeah, you hit it. It's fascinating, Ryan. I think we're a little over a dozen of these conversations I've had with folks in all different walks of the ecosystem and IT service management and beyond in some cases. And this comes up singularly. It's that whole thing, start with the end in mind. What is it that we we drive, how we contribute to the business goals, which means you need to understand the business goals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because like you hear, and you've been hearing it for years, like there's kind of IT, not just ITSM, but IT thought leaders in general that will say, this IT department, quote unquote, thing is something that, probably has a limited lifespan, that is, as we, there's that discussion about, business alignment, and that there shouldn't be an alignment because we should all just be there. We're all just doing one thing, that at some point it'll just be that way. And so what really the IT people need to kind of wrap their head around is just kind of looking at the overall experience of how things are working, the overall value chain, and a lot of the noise of the things like the memory leak that's causing the reboot, that causes the sleepless nights for the IT department. A lot of those things kind of just blend into something that's fundamentally larger and can be fixed rather than digging in the weeds and providing low value fixes when there's larger value fixes to be had.
That's right. That's right. And analytics really help you tell the difference between the noise and the signals that really have to be paid attention to.
Yeah, like I think, it's a story that gets told, right? When you look at the overall picture of, like you say, like the analytics, and I've seen really good dashboards in ServiceNow that have they've been very simple. They've highlighted exactly what's happening. You can see all the moving parts and the constraints and where they exist, and it's just like it's just like turning on a light bulb. And people are like, oh yeah, it's right there. Like now I can dial into it, like clicking through and dialing through and doing drill downs, but they can see them a lot easier, right? Because they're looking from that perspective rather than opposite perspective, like, what is this CPU doing today? Like nobody cares about that.
Yeah, excellent. Cool. And any other things that stand out in your mind from your experience that you want to share with folks before we start wrapping things up?
No, I guess that's got pretty much the kind of the base of the whole thing there. Yeah.
Pretty straightforward, right?
And it seems straightforward. Like I went to one organization. A guy brought me in. I'd been with him at 3 different companies at this point, and he's like, "Hey, I'm at this new company. Why don't you come over and take a look?" And I come there, and he's like, "I know it seems." He's like, "It must be like deja vu for you, like all the time. Like you come, you see, it's the same thing over and over and over." And I'm like, "It is, because it's almost culturally built up that way. That over time, everyone just has they're at that same point, but it's nice now because a lot of companies are kind of like, hey, wait a second, there's something we can do to fix that. There's people out there that can help us." And so I think it's important that when organizations are, where do we start? How do we get going? And in many cases, having a consultant like myself, no plug intended, but if they have someone come in and almost like an unbiased set of eyes to look at it and say, well, what does this mean? What does that do? They're like, oh, well, that's this or that's that. And that it totally helps them kind of see it from different pair of eyes.
It really is. I mean, I know it sounds self-serving to say it when we're in the business of helping companies do that, but there's that perspective, the fresh perspective that you bring, unencumbered by conditioning and tradition and political, the political realities of groups. And you can really ask questions that haven't been asked, maybe because they just haven't been thought of, or haven't been asked because maybe the politics aren't set up right to ask them. So yeah, excellent. So Ryan, as we wrap up here, tell us something interesting, special that's happening in your world that folks should take a little initiative and reach out to you. Maybe you're going to be speaking somewhere, or you have some special thing going on in your company.
So we just set up a partnership with ITpreneurs to do some ITIL 4 Foundations training. So we'll be setting up some new training sessions over the next little while for that. So that's available on the Blackfriar Consulting website. As always, I'm available for consulting on ITSM processes and how they apply to metrics to get your organization moving in the right direction. So I'm always available for those. But just in general, I find that the networking component of the ITSM space or IT in general, you don't have to, in many cases, you don't have to like pay someone to come and help you out. You can bounce ideas off people. I think they seem to be fairly free to do that, and I'm no different. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or any of the other social media sites that I'm on. And if you have questions, you can feel free to ask me without having to worry about if there's a big circle with a little circles or 46 pages or things like that.
Yeah. Awesome. Brian, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us today. And hopefully, down the road, we can invite you back and share some more stories from the battlefield.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, thanks, Ryan.
We see a time when all business leaders using ServiceNow Performance Analytics will easily know how to leverage its power to help them reach their business goals. Performance Analytics offers you a way to do that. To discover how you can get there faster, send us an email to info@westburyanalytics.com.